The first warning came from the Zelani frontier worlds, their crystalline cities going dark one by one across the outer rim. Ambassador Kethvar's 6 eyes trembled as he delivered the news to the Galactic Council chamber, his usually steady voice cracking like breaking glass. "The Devourers have returned," he whispered, and the massive assembly hall fell into absolute silence. Representatives from 47 species sat frozen in their seats, some beginning to weep, others already calculating escape routes. Admiral Sarah Chen watched from the human delegation's modest corner, her weathered face betraying no emotion. At 53, she had seen humanity's worst conflicts, but nothing in their brief galactic history had prepared any species for this moment. The Devourers were legend, nightmare, the boogeyman that entire civilizations used to frighten their young. They had last appeared 3,000 years ago, consuming everything in their path before vanishing into the void between galaxies. "How long do we have?" asked Chancellor Vorth of the Mandorian Republic, his tusked face pale beneath his ceremonial robes. Kethvar's translator struggled with his trembling words. "Our deep space monitoring stations detected the fleet 6 days ago, at their current speed, 18 standard days until they reach the core worlds." Panic erupted. The Threnodi delegates' chittering rose to a shriek. The massive Gornak representative began backing toward the exits, his heavy footsteps shaking the floor. Even the typically stoic Violani started their low, mournful death songs. "What about evacuation?" shouted someone from the Altarian section. "Where?" Kethvar's laugh was bitter. "They consume everything. Planets, moons, asteroids, space stations. They strip entire solar systems down to their stars, then somehow feed on the stellar energy itself until even the suns go cold and dark." Admiral Chen stood slowly, her movement cutting through the chaos like a knife. The chamber's attention focused on the small human woman, though many couldn't understand why. "What are their numbers?" she asked calmly. "Admiral," Kethvar's voice carried a note of pity, "your species hasn't faced them before. You don't understand. The fleet stretches across 17 light-years, billions of ships, each one larger than your greatest battleships. They don't fight wars, they consume realities." "That wasn't my question." Chen's voice remained steady. "Numbers." The Zelani ambassador consulted his tablet with shaking hands. "Conservative estimates suggest 40 billion vessels of various classifications. But Admiral, even if every ship in the known galaxy stood together, we would be outnumbered 10,000 to 1. Then we'll have to be clever." The chamber erupted in disbelief. The Corvani High Priest's tentacles writhed in distress. "Admiral Chen, with all respect to humanity's enthusiasm, this is not a battle to be won. This is an extinction event to be survived if survival is even possible." "Every species has tried to fight them," added the Mekari delegate, her cybernetic voice flat with despair. "The ancient progenitors who built technologies we still cannot comprehend threw everything they had against the Devourers. They lasted 3 days. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "What happened to the other species, the ones who ran?" "Some escaped to other galaxies," Kethvar replied. "The lucky ones. Others tried to hide in pocket dimensions, deep space, or dead zones. A few survived each time, but barely. Scattered remnants maintaining their cultures in exile until it was safe to return." "How long before it's safe?" "The Devourers follow a cycle. They appear, consume what they can find, then vanish for roughly 3,000 years. No one knows why." Admiral Chen walked to the center of the chamber, her boots echoing in the vast space. "So the plan is to run and hide for 3 millennia, hoping they don't find us, then come back to pick up the pieces of whatever's left." "It's the only plan that has ever worked," said Chancellor Vorth sadly. "Admiral, I understand humans are a young species, full of fire and determination, but this is not a war. This is a natural disaster on a galactic scale." "Natural disasters can be fought," Chen replied. "Humans have been doing it for millennia. We build dikes against floods, storm shelters against tornadoes, fire breaks against wildfires. We don't always win, but we always fight." The Threnodi delegates' chittering took on a mocking tone. "Admiral, your entire species has existed for mere thousands of years. You have been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries. The Devourers have been ending civilizations since before your planet cooled." Chen smiled, and something about that expression made several aliens take an unconscious step backward. "Maybe that's exactly why we can win." "Explain," demanded the Corvani High Priest. Every species here is ancient, wise, advanced beyond human comprehension. You've all grown comfortable with your technology, your established ways of thinking, your proven methods. You look at the devourers and see an insurmountable obstacle because you're trying to fight them the way civilizations fought 3,000 years ago. She pulled out her personal tablet and activated the holographic display. A three-dimensional map of the galaxy appeared, showing the approaching devourer fleet as a massive red cloud advancing from the rim. But humans were still figuring things out. We're still desperate, still hungry, still stupid enough to try impossible things. And sometimes, just sometimes, being too dumb to know something can't be done is exactly the advantage you need. The Gornak representative rumbled from near the exit. "What are you proposing, little human?" "I'm proposing we stop running. I'm proposing we gather every ship, every weapon, every clever idea from every species in this galaxy and make our stand. Not to win cleanly, but to make the victory so costly that the devourers think twice about coming back." Silence fell over the chamber, but it was different now. Not the silence of despair, but of consideration. "Even if such a thing were possible," said the Mekari delegate slowly, "even if we could somehow coordinate the military forces of 47 different species with incompatible technologies and completely different tactical doctrines, we would still be facing impossible odds." "Yes," Chen agreed cheerfully. "Humans love impossible odds." The Violani death songs had stopped. Their representative, an elderly female named Shendari, spoke for the first time. "Admiral Chen, in our language, we have a word that roughly translates to the courage of the soon-to-die. It describes the fierce bravery that comes when one has nothing left to lose." "That's exactly what I'm talking about." Shendari's golden eyes gleamed. "The Violani fled the devourers twice in our history. Both times we lost 90% of our population and most of our heritage. Perhaps it is time to try a different path." Ambassador Kethvar's crystalline form seemed to brighten slightly. "The Zelani have detailed sensor data on the devourer fleet composition. If we are truly considering this madness, that information would be valuable." One by one, representatives began to speak. The massive Gornak mentioned their planet-cracking mining equipment. The Threnodi offered their swarm tactics expertise. The Mekari discussed their adaptive AI systems. Even the mystical Korvani suggested their reality manipulation technologies might have military applications. Admiral Chen found herself at the center of a growing storm of desperate planning. It wasn't hope, exactly, not yet. But it was something humanity understood better than any other species in the galaxy. It was defiance. Chancellor Vorth stood on his thick legs, his tusks gleaming under the chamber lights. "Admiral Chen, if we do this, if we truly attempt to stand against the devourers, we will need unified command. No species will trust another to lead this effort." "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting that humanity, as the youngest and most foolishly optimistic species present, take command of this doomed endeavor." His eyes twinkled with what might have been admiration. "After all, who better to lead a hopeless cause than the species too young to understand it truly is hopeless?" The vote was surprisingly unanimous. Perhaps because, deep down, every species in the galaxy was tired of running. Tired of losing their homeworlds, their cultures, their children to an unstoppable force that appeared every 3,000 years like cosmic clockwork. Admiral Chen accepted command of what historians would later call either the greatest last stand in galactic history, or the most magnificent act of species-wide suicide ever attempted. As the emergency session ended and representatives hurried off to contact their homeworlds, Chen remained in the chamber, studying the holographic display of the approaching threat. The red cloud of the Devourer fleet looked like a cancer spreading across the star map. Her aide, Lieutenant Commander Torres, approached cautiously. "Admiral, with respect, do you actually have a plan?" Chen's smile was sharp as a blade. "Not yet, but I know someone who might." She pulled out her secure communicator and opened a channel to Earth. The response came immediately, despite the distance. "Sarah, how did the council meeting go?" The voice belonged to Dr. Elizabeth Reyes, Director of Humanities Theoretical Weapons Division and Chen's oldest friend. "Badly. We're all going to die in 18 days unless we can figure out how to kill 40 billion alien ships with technology that's thousands of years ahead of ours." A pause, then, "Interesting challenge, tell me more." As Chen began briefing her friend on the impossible situation, she felt the familiar warmth of human determination settling into her bones. They might be about to attempt the most foolish military action in galactic history. But at least they wouldn't die running. The Devourers were coming, and for the first time in 3,000 years, something would be waiting for them. Something that had never learned the meaning of surrender. Something human. Dr. Elizabeth Reyes stood in the center of what had once been Earth's largest sports stadium, now converted into the most chaotic war room in human history. Holographic displays flickered everywhere, showing ship movements, tactical simulations, and enough technical specifications to choke a quantum computer. Around her, the greatest minds from 47 different species worked frantically alongside human engineers, physicists, and what Admiral Chen privately called professional madmen. "The problem," announced Dr. Vector, the Mekari strategic analyst whose cybernetic brain could process information at superhuman speeds, "is not just their numbers. The Devourers appear to violate several fundamental laws of physics." "Explain," said Reyes, not looking up from her calculations. "Their ships consume matter and convert it directly to energy with 100% efficiency. This should be impossible. Matter-to-energy conversion at that scale should create massive gravitational distortions, yet their ships move freely through space." Professor Krelnoth, a four-armed Threnody expert in exotic physics, chittered in agreement. "Furthermore, they appear to be able to drain energy directly from stellar cores without any visible technology. Our best theories suggest they're somehow manipulating the fundamental forces of reality itself." Reyes finally looked up from her work, her eyes bright with the kind of dangerous enthusiasm that made seasoned military officers nervous. "So they're not just using advanced technology, they're using impossible technology." "That's one way to put it," said Dr. Morgeth, a Gornak physicist whose rocky hide bore scars from countless mining accidents. "My people have been studying the aftermath of their previous visits. They leave behind zones where normal physics simply don't work anymore. Space where gravity flows backward, areas where time moves differently, regions where matter spontaneously converts to exotic particles we don't even have names for." The human scientist nodded thoughtfully. "Show me the sensor data from the Zelani frontier again." Ambassador Kethvar, who had remained on Earth to coordinate with the defense effort, activated a massive holographic display. The image showed the edge of Zelani space, but it was wrong in ways that hurt to look at. Stars bent into impossible shapes, space itself seemed to fold and twist, and in the center of it all, a massive fleet of ships that looked more like living organisms than constructed vessels. There, Reyes pointed to a section of the display. "Those energy readings, they're not just consuming matter, they're consuming space-time itself. The fabric of reality is being metabolized." The assembled scientists fell silent, contemplating the implications. "Which means," Reyes continued with growing excitement, "they're not invincible, they're parasites." "I fail to see how that helps us," said Dr. Vector. "Because parasites can only survive in specific environments. They've evolved to feed on normal space-time, but what happens if we change the menu?" Professor Krelnoth's four arms gestured frantically. "Impossible. The energy requirements to alter fundamental physical constants across any meaningful volume of space would require the total output of hundreds of stars." Reyes grinned. "Good thing we have access to hundreds of stars." She walked to the central command console and pulled up humanity's most classified project files. 3 years ago, we made contact with the Corvani and learned about their reality manipulation technologies. 6 months ago, we figured out how to combine it with our own quantum field generators. 2 weeks ago, we created our first stable pocket of altered spacetime in a laboratory. The display showed footage from a secret facility on Mars. Inside a heavily shielded chamber, a cube of space roughly 1 meter on each side flickered and warped. The laws of physics within that cube were demonstrably different from the universe outside. "The field was stable for 17 minutes before it collapsed," Reyes explained. "Not very impressive for a laboratory experiment, but—" Dr. Morgeth's rocky features cracked into what might have been a smile. "But if you could scale it up and maintain it across interstellar distances." "Exactly. We create a zone of altered physics between the Devourers and the core worlds. Force them to fight in an environment where their impossible technology suddenly doesn't work." The Threnody professors, chittering, took on a skeptical tone. The power requirements would still be astronomical, and you would need to coordinate the field generators across multiple star systems to create a barrier large enough to matter. Reyes nodded toward the holographic display, which now showed a tactical map of the inner galaxy. Which is why we're not trying to block them, we're going to trap them. Red dots appeared on the map, marking the positions of every major fleet in the galaxy. Blue lines connected them, forming an enormous three-dimensional web around a central point. The Nexus system, breathed Ambassador Kethvar. You want to lure them into the Nexus system. It's perfect, Reyes said, warming to her subject. 5 dead worlds orbiting a dying red giant. No civilian populations to evacuate, but plenty of mass to work with. The star itself is unstable, ready to go supernova within the next few thousand years, and it's strategically positioned so that anyone trying to reach the core worlds would naturally pass through it. Dr. Vector's cybernetic eye whirred as he processed the implications. You're planning to turn an entire star system into a trap. Better than that, we're going to turn it into a completely different star system. The Corvani have agreed to help us modify the fundamental constants of physics within a sphere roughly 10 astronomical units in diameter. Inside that sphere, the Devourer's technology won't work. And then what? Asked Dr. Morgeth. Even if you strip them of their impossible advantages, they still outnumber us thousands to one. Rey's grin widened. Then we introduce them to the other thing humans are really good at. She activated another display, this one showing technical specifications that made the alien scientists recoil in horror. Thermonuclear weapons, she announced cheerfully. Fusion bombs, antimatter warheads, quantum cascade devices, and a few things we invented specifically for this occasion that I'm not allowed to name in mixed company. Professor Krelnoth's 4 arms waved in distress. Dr. Reyes, the radiation alone would sterilize half the galaxy. Not if we detonate them inside our modified space-time bubble. The altered physics should contain the blast effects and prevent them from spreading beyond the trap zone. Should, Dr. Vector's mechanical voice somehow conveyed dismay. Well, we've never actually tested it on this scale, Reyes admitted. But our simulations suggest it will work about 60% of the time. The assembled scientists stared at her in horror. What happens the other 40% of the time? Whispered Dr. Morgeth. Best case scenario, we accidentally create a new type of star. Worst case scenario, we tear a hole in space-time itself and probably destroy this entire galactic arm. Reyes shrugged. Either way, the Devourers won't be a problem anymore. Ambassador Kethvar's crystalline form flickered with distress. Dr. Reyes, you are proposing to risk the destruction of billions of inhabited worlds on a 60% chance of success. Actually, said a new voice from the entrance, it's closer to 73%. Admiral Chen strode into the command center, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Behind her came a parade of military officers from a dozen different species, all wearing the same expression of determined exhaustion. Admiral, Reyes called out, how did the fleet coordination go? Better than expected. The Gornak have agreed to convert their mining platforms into mobile weapons batteries. The Threnody are lending us their entire swarm fleet, and the Violani. Chen paused, a look of amazement crossing her face. The Violani have volunteered to serve as suicide crews for the close-range assault ships. The Violani volunteered for suicide missions. Dr. Vector's mechanical voice rose in pitch. The Violani are pacifists. Apparently, Chen replied grimly, 3,000 years of running has changed their perspective on pacifism. She moved to the central display and began marking positions. We have commitments from 38 species for full military cooperation. The others are providing logistical support and evacuation assistance for their own populations, but they won't stand and fight. That's more than I expected, Reyes said. It's more than anyone expected, especially when they realized what we're actually planning to do. Chen's expression grew serious. Liz, I need to know, will this work? Dr. Reyes was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical displays and energy calculations that surrounded them. Honestly, I have no idea. We're combining theoretical physics, impossible alien technology, and enough explosive power to crack planets. Half of what we're planning has never been tried before, and the other half probably shouldn't be tried ever. But it's better than running. And if it works, if we can actually pull this off, the Devourers will think very carefully before they ever come back to this galaxy. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. How long do you need to set up the trap? The field generators are already being deployed. Corvani reality shapers are working with our quantum physicists to modify the space-time constants in the Nexus system. The weapons platforms will take another 8 days to position, assuming the Gornak can move their mining equipment as fast as they claim. And the fleet deployment? 12 days for full positioning, but we can start moving ships now. The Devourers should reach the outer edge of our sensor net in 6 days. If we're lucky, they'll take the bait and head straight for the core worlds through the Nexus system. Chen activated her communicator and opened channels to fleet commands across the galaxy. All units, this is Admiral Chen. Operation Last Stand is approved and active. Begin fleet movements immediately. All species, all ships, all weapons. We make our stand in 12 days. As acknowledgments poured in from dozens of different species, Dr. Reyes found herself thinking about the mathematics of what they were attempting. The energy equations alone were staggering. They were planning to modify the fundamental laws of physics across an entire star system, then detonate enough weapons to destroy a small galaxy, all while coordinating the largest military force in galactic history. Any sane species would consider it impossible. Liz, Admiral Chen said quietly, there's something else, something the Council didn't want to announce publicly. What? The Devourers aren't just randomly consuming everything in their path. They're heading directly for inhabited worlds, bypassing empty systems with valuable resources. Whatever they're doing, they're specifically targeting living planets. Dr. Reyes felt a chill run down her spine. That changes things. How? If they're specifically hunting living worlds, then this isn't just about resources or territory. This is about eliminating life itself. She turned back to her calculations, her mind racing. We're not just fighting for our civilizations, we're fighting for the concept of life in this galaxy. Admiral Chen nodded grimly, which means we can't afford to lose. No, Reyes agreed, her hands already moving to adjust their plans. We can't. As the two humans worked frantically to refine their impossible plan, the rest of the war room buzzed with activity. Species that had been enemies for millennia worked side by side. Ancient civilizations shared their most guarded secrets with young upstarts who had been in space for barely 2 centuries. The Devourers were coming, and for the first time in galactic history, someone was going to be ready for them. Whether they would survive the encounter was another question entirely. Captain Maria Santos had never expected to die in the Nexus system, but as she watched the reality around her ship twist into impossible configurations, she began to suspect it was inevitable. The modified physics field was holding barely, creating a zone of altered spacetime that extended nearly to the edge of the star system. Within that zone, the fundamental constants of the universe had been carefully adjusted to make the Devourers' impossible technology significantly less impossible. Engineering report, she called to her mixed-species crew aboard the human destroyer Defiance Asterisk. The reality anchors are stable, Captain, replied Chief Engineer Tokmer, a Gornak whose massive frame was surprisingly gentle with delicate instruments. But I'm reading fluctuations in the quantum field generators. The Corvani warn that maintaining this level of spacetime modification for more than 6 hours will risk cascade failures. Acknowledged. Tactical, what's our enemy status? Lieutenant HFY, a Threnody whose compound eyes could process multiple data streams simultaneously, chittered nervously as she worked her console. The Devourer fleet entered our modified space 37 minutes ago. They've slowed significantly, and I'm detecting what appears to be confusion in their formation patterns. Captain Santos allowed herself a small smile. The trap was working. The Devourers had expected to encounter the same helpless civilizations they'd found every 3,000 years for millions of years. Instead, they'd found 47 species working together and armed with weapons that shouldn't exist. Long-range sensors show the main fleet spreading out, continued HFY. They're adapting faster than predicted, but their ships are definitely struggling with the altered physics. Through the viewscreen, Santos could see the enemy vessels clearly for the first time. The Devourer's ships were organic nightmares, all flowing curves and impossible angles that hurt to look at directly. They moved like living creatures rather than constructed vessels, and their hulls seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But inside the modified space-time field, they moved sluggishly, their reality-eating weapons firing in bursts rather than continuous streams. "Admiral Chen to all units," came the voice from the command channel. "Phase 1 is complete. The enemy is trapped and struggling with modified physics. Begin Phase 2. Santos keyed her communicator. "All ships, this is Captain Santos. Begin coordinated assault. Remember, we only get one shot at this." The largest fleet in galactic history moved as one. Gornak mining platforms, converted to weapon platforms, opened fire with planet-cracking energy beams. Threnody swarm ships attacked in waves of thousands, their small size allowing them to slip between the Devourer's defensive fire. Violani vessels, their crews singing death songs that echoed across subspace channels, flew directly into enemy formations with their weapons set to overload. The battle that followed defied every principle of space combat developed over millions of years of galactic warfare. Ships fought at ranges measured in planetary diameters, weapons that could shatter moons fired continuously for minutes at a time, and the very fabric of spacetime rippled under the stress of forces that shouldn't exist. "Captain," called ZH Cry, "I'm reading massive energy buildups throughout the enemy fleet. They're adapting to our modified physics faster than predicted." "How long until they're fully operational again?" "At current rates, perhaps 90 minutes. Santos felt her stomach drop. The plan had assumed they would have at least 3 hours before the Devourers figured out how to work within the altered physics field. 90 minutes wasn't enough time to eliminate 40 billion enemy vessels. "Emergency channel to Dr. Reyes," she ordered. The scientist's voice crackled with static from the command ship determination. "I see it, Captain. They're learning to modify their own technology in real time. We need to accelerate the timeline." "What does that mean?" "It means we detonate everything now, while they're still partially disabled, instead of waiting for optimal positioning." Captain Santos felt the blood drain from her face. "Liz, half our fleet is still in the blast radius." "I know." The simple acknowledgement carried the weight of millions of lives. Across the fleet, captains of dozens of different species came to the same horrible realization. They could save the galaxy, but only by sacrificing themselves. "Admiral Chen to all units," came the command channel again, and Admiral Chen's voice was steady despite the impossible decision she was making. "All ships, we are accelerating the timeline for Phase 3. Any vessel that cannot reach minimum safe distance in the next 20 minutes should signal their understanding and prepare for final assault." The response was immediate and heartbreaking. Across the fleet, thousands of ships acknowledged the order. Gornak mining captains sang traditional farewell songs. Threnody swarm leaders chittered final messages to their hives. Violani crews increased the volume of their death songs until they could be heard on every channel. But it was the human responses that surprised the other species. Ship after ship acknowledged the order with simple, matter-of-fact professionalism. No dramatic speeches, no elaborate farewells, just acknowledgement of duty and acceptance of consequence. "This is the Destroyer Defiance Asterisk," Captain Santos found herself saying. "We're too deep in the formation to reach safe distance. We understand the mission parameters and will continue assault until detonation." Similar messages came from hundreds of human vessels, scattered throughout the fleet. They had volunteered to lead the most dangerous parts of the assault, placing themselves closest to the enemy formations. "Captain," Chief Engineer Tokmer said quietly, "it has been an honor serving with humans." "The honor has been ours," Santos replied and meant it. The final 20 minutes of the Battle of Nexus System would be studied by military historians for millennia, assuming there were any historians left to study it. Ships that knew they were doomed threw themselves at enemy formations with desperate courage. Weapons that had never been tested in combat fired at maximum power until they burned out. Crews that had never worked together before the crisis coordinated attacks with the precision of veterans. The Devourers fought back with increasing effectiveness as they adapted to the modified physics, but they seemed genuinely confused by what they were facing. For the first time in their species' history, their prey was not running. For the first time in millions of years, someone was shooting back. 10 minutes to detonation," announced Dr. Reyes from the command ship. "All units, final assault phase, make them count." Captain Santos watched her tactical display as friendly contacts began winking out one by one. Each disappearing dot represented hundreds or thousands of lives, beings from across the galaxy who had chosen to stand and fight rather than run and hide. "Captain," ZH said urgently, "I'm detecting massive energy buildup from the Devourer command ship. Whatever they're doing, it's on the scale of stellar engineering. Can you identify the target?" "They appear to be targeting our reality anchors. If they can destabilize the modified physics field." Santos understood immediately. Without the altered spacetime to contain the blast, the weapon's Dr. Rays was about to detonate would sterilize half the galaxy instead of just the Nexus system. "All units," she broadcast on the emergency channel, "the enemy is targeting our reality anchors. Any ship capable of intercept, move now." What happened next would be remembered as either the greatest act of heroism in galactic history or the most magnificent example of species-wide insanity ever recorded. Across the fleet, ships changed course to intercept attacks aimed at the reality anchors. Not just human ships, but vessels from every species in the Alliance. The massive Gornak platform Rockbreaker threw itself between a Devourer attack and the primary anchor point, its hull cracking under impossible stresses. Threnodi's swarm ships formed living shields around the quantum field generators. Even the mystical Corvani, who rarely involved themselves in physical combat, manifested reality barriers to protect the delicate equipment maintaining their trap. 5 minutes to detonation, Dr. Rays announced. Reality anchors holding at 87% efficiency. Captain Santos watched her ship's hull temperature climb toward critical levels. The Defiance was deep inside a formation of Devourer vessels, her weapons firing continuously at targets too large to miss. Around her, space itself was beginning to break down under the stress of the modified physics and the incredible amounts of energy being exchanged. 2 minutes to detonation. All units, this is Admiral Chen. It has been an honor serving with all of you. Whatever happens next, you have made sure that life in this galaxy has a future." Santos found herself thinking about Earth, about the small blue world where humanity had learned to reach for the stars. It was 18,000 light-years away, safe behind the defensive lines that the sacrifice here would maintain. "Captain," Tokmer said softly, "I can no longer maintain structural integrity. The ship is breaking apart." "Understood. All hands prepare for." The universe exploded. Dr. Elizabeth Rays had calculated that the combined detonation of every exotic weapon in the Galactic Alliance would release energy equivalent to a medium-sized supernova. She had been off by several orders of magnitude. The modified physics field, instead of containing the blast, seemed to amplify it. The explosion tore through spacetime itself, creating effects that had no names in any language. The Nexus system's star, already unstable, was caught in the blast wave and underwent catastrophic collapse. The resulting black hole formed in seconds rather than the usual millions of years. But the explosion did more than just destroy. The interaction between the exotic weapons and the modified spacetime created something unprecedented, a zone of permanently altered physics stretching across dozens of light years. Within that zone, the fundamental forces of nature had been rewritten in ways that made the Devourer's impossible technology genuinely impossible. The enemy fleet, all 40 billion vessels, simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not damaged, but actually unmade. They became incompatible with the new version of reality and faded from existence like dreams upon waking. The blast wave, contained within the modified space but still unimaginably powerful, raced outward until it encountered the edge of the physics field. There, it stopped. The carefully tuned constants of normal spacetime absorbed and dispersed the energy over several months, creating aurora effects visible from 1,000 worlds, but causing no damage beyond spectacular light shows. Admiral Chen's flagship, Determination, rode the edge of the blast wave, her hull glowing cherry red from radiation but intact. Around her, the few hundred ships that had managed to reach minimum safe distance began damage reports and casualty assessments. "Admiral," came Dr. Ray's voice over the communications system, "the reality anchors are failing. The modified physics field is collapsing." "How long do we have?" "Perhaps 6 hours. Then everything returns to normal spacetime constants." Chen stared at the tactical display, which now showed empty space where moments before the largest fleet in galactic history had fought the most impossible battle in recorded time. "Sensor sweep." Any sign of surviving enemy vessels? Negative, Admiral. Long-range sensors detect no Devourer signatures within a radius of 50 light-years. And our losses? The pause that followed told Chen everything she needed to know before the numbers came. Preliminary estimates suggest 73% casualties across all Allied forces. We lost approximately 15,000 ships and their crews. 15,000 ships, roughly 12 million beings from dozens of different species, all of whom had chosen to stand and fight instead of run and hide. Admiral, Dr. Reyes continued softly, initial analysis suggests we've created a permanent dead zone where the Devourer's technology can never function again. The modified spacetime has become stable in its altered state. It's like we've built a scar across the galaxy that their ships simply cannot cross. Chen nodded slowly, understanding the implications. The Devourers could still return in 3,000 years, but they would have to find a way around a 40-light-year barrier of impossible space. And if they did find a way around it, they would discover that the species of this galaxy were no longer the same helpless prey they had hunted for millions of years. Signal to all surviving vessels, she ordered. Stand down from combat operations. Begin search and rescue for any survivors in the debris field. As her ship began the slow process of accounting for the cost of victory, Admiral Chen found herself thinking about Captain Santos and the thousands of other officers who had acknowledged their own deaths with simple professionalism. They had bought the galaxy a future, but the price had been higher than anyone could have imagined. The Devourers were gone, at least for now, but the galaxy would never be the same. 3 months after the Battle of Nexus System, the galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened. Ambassador Kethvar stood in the rebuilt Galactic Council chambers, his crystalline form flickering with nervous energy as he addressed the largest gathering of species representatives in recorded history. The memorial lists are still being compiled, he announced to the somber assembly. Current estimates place the total casualties at 12.7 million beings from 43 different species. The human contingent alone lost 8.2 million personnel. A profound silence settled over the chamber. Even species that had spent millennia at war with each other sat quietly, processing the magnitude of sacrifice that had saved them all. The Nexus anomaly, Kethvar continued, using the scientific term for what everyone simply called the scar, remains stable. The zone of altered physics now extends across 47 light-years and appears to be permanent. Nothing utilizing Devourer-type technology can cross it. Chancellor Vorth of the Mandorian Republic rose slowly on his thick legs. Ambassador Kethvar, what of the long-term implications? Have we simply delayed the inevitable? The question hung in the air like a physical thing. Everyone knew the Devourers operated on 3,000-year cycles. The current threat was ended, but what about the next one? Dr. Elizabeth Reyes, who had somehow survived the battle despite being at the center of the most dangerous scientific experiment in galactic history, stepped forward. Chancellor, our analysis suggests we've done more than delay. We've fundamentally changed the nature of the threat. She activated the chamber's holographic display, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with the Nexus anomaly marked in brilliant red. The Devourers appear to follow predictable migration patterns based on their technology's interaction with normal spacetime. The anomaly has created what we're calling a dead zone for their type of technology. Meaning, asked the Makari delegate. Meaning they can't simply return via the same route. They'll have to find a way around the barrier, which adds approximately 1,500 years to their journey time. Or they'll have to develop entirely new technology that can function within altered spacetime constants. Admiral Chen, who had been awarded the unprecedented title of Supreme Commander of Galactic Defense, stood from her position near the human delegation. Dr. Reyes, tell them about the other discovery. Reyes nodded grimly. In analyzing the debris field from the battle, we found something unexpected. Devourer technology isn't entirely alien. Significant portions of their systems show design patterns consistent with known galactic civilizations. A shocked murmur rippled through the assembly. You're saying, Chancellor Vorth said carefully, that the Devourers were once like us. We're saying the Devourers might still be us, Admiral Chen replied. Or versions of us. Our working theory is that they're the end result of civilizations that chose enhancement over preservation. species that modified themselves so extensively they became something else entirely. The implications sent waves of horror through the assembly. Several delegates began urgent conversations with their homeworlds. Shendari, the elderly Violani representative whose people had volunteered for suicide missions during the battle, spoke into the silence. If this is true, if the Devourers are what we become when we lose our way, then the lesson is clear. We must change not just our defenses, but ourselves. How do we do that? Asked the Threnodi delegate. It was Dr. Morgoth, the scarred Gornak physicist, who answered. We learn from what happened here. For the first time in galactic history, 47 species worked together as one people. We shared technology, tactics, even crew members across species lines. He gestured toward the display showing battle statistics. The most effective units were mixed crews. Human adaptability combined with Threnodi processing speed, Gornak durability enhanced by Mekari precision, Violani intuition guided by Corvani reality shaping. We were stronger together than any of us were separately. Admiral Chen nodded. Which is why the Galactic Defense Initiative isn't ending with this battle. We're proposing permanent integration. The chamber erupted in surprised conversation. The idea of permanent military cooperation between species was revolutionary enough, but Admiral Chen was clearly suggesting something far more extensive. What kind of integration? Demanded Chancellor Vorth. Full integration, Chen replied calmly. Shared technology development, joint research facilities, mixed crews on all major vessels, combined training academies. We want to create a galactic civilization that thinks and acts as one people. That's impossible, protested the Altarian delegate. Our species have different physiologies, different psychological needs, incompatible social structures. So did the crews who fought at Nexus, Admiral Chen pointed out. Captain Santos commanded a mixed crew that included beings who breathe methane, others who require high-radiation environments, and at least 3 species that don't experience linear time. They found ways to work together when survival depended on it. Dr. Reyes stepped forward again. We're not talking about homogenization. We're talking about specialization within unity. Each species maintains its unique strengths while contributing to a larger whole. She activated a new display showing proposed fleet compositions. Imagine starships designed from the ground up for mixed crews. Gornak engineering sections that can withstand any disaster, Threnodi information processing centers that can coordinate thousands of simultaneous operations, Violani meditation chambers that can enhance intuitive decision-making, human command structures that specialize in creative problem-solving. And what happens, asked the Corvani High Priest, his tentacles writhing with concern, when this grand alliance faces internal conflict, when species interests diverge? The same thing that happened when we faced the Devourers, Admiral Chen replied simply. We remember that survival depends on cooperation. Ambassador Kethvar's crystalline form brightened. There is precedent for this. The emergency defense protocols established during the crisis have continued to function effectively during the reconstruction phase. Mixed crews are reporting higher efficiency and innovation rates than single-species operations. It's true, confirmed the Mekari delegate. Our preliminary analysis shows that integrated teams solve complex problems approximately 30% faster than homogeneous groups. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The species that had stood together against the Devourers had proven something that philosophers had argued about for millennia. That cooperation was not just possible across species lines, but actively beneficial. The final vote establishing the Galactic Defense Initiative as a permanent institution was unanimous, though several delegates noted it was less a vote than a recognition of reality. The emergency cooperation that had saved them all had already evolved into something larger. But it was the human proposal for the memorial that surprised everyone. We want to build it at the edge of the Nexus anomaly, Admiral Chen explained. A station that serves as both monument and early warning system. Mixed crews from all species, dedicated to watching for the Devourer's return and to remembering what we learned here. What kind of memorial? Asked Shendari. A living one, Dr. Reyes replied. Research facilities, training academies, cultural exchange programs, a place where young beings from every species can come to learn what their ancestors accomplished when they worked together. Chancellor Vorth's tusks gleamed with what might have been approval. You want to turn our greatest victory into a permanent lesson. We want to make sure we never forget, Chen said simply. The Devourers will return eventually in some form. When they do, we want our descendants to be ready, not just with weapons, but with unity. The memorial station would take 5 years to build and would become the most important installation in galactic history. Young beings from every species would train together, learn together, and forge bonds that would reshape galactic civilization. But perhaps the most important change was happening in the schools and homes across 1,000 worlds, where children of dozens of different species were learning about the Battle of Nexus system. They learned about the Gornak engineers who died maintaining impossible machines, the Threnody pilots who flew impossible missions, the Violani pacifists who chose to fight for peace. And they learned about humans, the young species that had been too stupid to know that some things were impossible. In the years that followed, historians would mark the Battle of Nexus system as the beginning of the true galactic age, when separate species became one people. They would write extensively about the technological advances, the political changes, and the cultural evolution that followed. But they would also write about something simpler and more profound, the discovery that courage was contagious across species lines, and that sometimes the most important victory was not defeating an enemy, but learning who you could become when you refused to give up. The Devourers had taught the galaxy about fear. Humanity had taught the galaxy about defiance. Together, they had learned about hope. As the council session ended and delegates prepared to return to their homeworlds, Ambassador Kethvar found himself standing next to Admiral Chen in the empty chamber. "Admiral," he said quietly, "do you truly believe we can maintain this unity when the immediate threat is past?" Chen smiled, and Kethvar was struck again by how that simple human expression could convey such complex emotions. "Ambassador, 3 months ago, you would have said it was impossible for 47 species to coordinate a military campaign against an enemy that violated the laws of physics." "Point taken. Besides," Chen continued, "we have an advantage now that we didn't have before. Which is, we know what we're capable of when we work together, and we have 12 million martyrs to remind us of the cost of division." As they walked toward the exit, Kethvar realized that the human was right. The galaxy had been forever changed by the Battle of Nexus system, not just by what they had destroyed, but by what they had created. For the first time in galactic history, 47 species truly believed they were stronger together than apart. The Devourers might return in 3,000 years. They would find a very different galaxy waiting for them. 2,947 years after the Battle of Nexus system, Commander Zara Chenkethvar stood on the observation deck of the Memorial Station Unity's edge and watched the long-range sensors detect something that made her blood freeze. "Commander," called Lieutenant Thekmer, a being whose genetic heritage included Gornak durability, Threnody processing speed, and human adaptability, "we're receiving confirmation from the Deep Space Monitoring Network. The signatures match historical records." The Devourers had returned, but they were not the same creatures that had terrorized the galaxy 3 millennia ago. The massive fleet approaching from intergalactic space moved differently, their ships smaller and more numerous. Instead of the organic nightmares that had consumed entire star systems, these vessels displayed clean geometric patterns and energy signatures that registered as almost familiar. "Analysis?" Commander Chenkethvar asked. Though her surname honored both the human admiral who had led the last defense and the Zelani ambassador who had brought the first warning, her training was purely integrated galactic standard. "They're using conventional technology," reported Dr. Malrise, the station's chief scientist whose quadruple heritage included DNA from 4 different species. "No reality manipulation systems, no space-time consumption patterns. They're flying ships that obey normal physics." "How is that possible? The records clearly indicate." "Commander," interrupted the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission. It's in standard galactic." The message, when it came through, was perhaps the most shocking thing anyone in the galaxy had heard in 3,000 years. "This is Fleet Commander Vashter of the Devourer Reformed Fleet. We request permission to approach the Nexus Memorial Zone for formal negotiations." The silence on the command deck was absolute, Finally, Commander Cheng Kethvar found her voice. Say again, unknown vessel. Did you identify yourself as Devourer? Confirmed, Commander. We are the descendants of the entities you knew as the Devourers. We have returned to offer formal apology for the actions of our ancestors and to request membership in the Galactic Alliance. Commander Cheng Kethvar felt her knees go weak. In the 3,000 years since the Battle of Nexus system, the galaxy had prepared for the Devourer's return in every possible way except this one. Lieutenant, she said carefully, please transmit this conversation to Galactic Command immediately. Priority Alpha protocols. Already done, Commander. We're receiving emergency responses from 47 member worlds. The response came faster than anyone had expected. Within 6 hours, the largest diplomatic fleet in galactic history was converging on the Nexus Memorial Zone. Representatives from every member species, military commanders, scientists, and historians all rushed to witness what might be the most important first contact in galactic history. Admiral Santos, whose mixed heritage honored both the Corvani mysticism and the human pragmatism that had saved the galaxy, arrived aboard the flagship, determined Unity Asterisk. His first order was to establish defensive positions around the memorial station, not because he expected trouble, but because 3,000 years of preparation couldn't be abandoned lightly. Fleet Commander Vashter, Admiral Santos transmitted on the diplomatic channel, you will understand our caution. Your predecessors were responsible for the deaths of millions of our people. We understand completely, Admiral. We request permission to transmit our historical records and genetic data for analysis. You will find that we are quite different from the entities that attacked your galaxy. The data package that followed was staggering. Genetic records, historical archives, technological specifications, and cultural documentation that painted a picture of transformation that defied every assumption the galaxy had made about the Devourers. Dr. Malrise worked frantically to analyze the information, her four-species heritage providing unique insights into the complex data patterns. Admiral, she reported after 6 hours of intensive study, these beings are definitely descended from the original Devourers, but they've undergone massive genetic and cultural modification. Explain. According to their records, the original Devourer civilization collapsed approximately 2,000 years ago when their reality manipulation technology became unstable. The survivors were forced to rebuild their entire society using conventional physics. Admiral Santos studied the data displays showing Devourer fleet compositions and technology trees. How do we know this isn't an elaborate deception? Because their technology is actually inferior to ours in most respects, Dr. Malrise replied with surprise. They're using fusion drives while we have quantum tunneling engines. Their weapons are chemical nuclear while ours are exotic matter-based. If this were a deception, they'd have made themselves seem more impressive. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled fleet. The galaxy had spent 3 millennia preparing for the return of an unstoppable force, only to discover that force had evolved into something quite different. Fleet Commander Vashter, Admiral Santos transmitted, we're prepared to begin formal negotiations. However, you'll understand that trust will take time to rebuild. Of course, Admiral. We propose beginning with a cultural exchange. We would like to send a small delegation to study your memorial station and learn about the battle that changed both our civilizations. The delegation that came aboard Unity's Edge Asterisk 3 days later was nothing like what anyone had expected. 6 beings whose physical forms clearly showed Devourer heritage, but who moved and spoke with patterns that seemed almost familiar. Their leader, Scholar Nethvara, could have been mistaken for a particularly exotic member of any number of galactic species. We have studied the records of the Battle of Nexus system for over 1,000 years, she explained to the assembled diplomats and historians. Your victory taught our predecessors that the path they were following led only to destruction. Commander Cheng Kethvar, still struggling to process the situation, asked the question everyone was thinking. How do we know you've truly changed? How do we know this isn't just another form of predation? Scholar Nethvara's expression, though alien, was clearly one of understanding. Commander, we anticipated this question. We brought proof. The proof was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Complete technological specifications for every weapon system the reformed Devourers possessed, genetic maps of their entire population, even the location coordinates of their homeworlds and colonies. "You're giving us everything," breathed Dr. Malrise. "Complete strategic intelligence on your entire civilization." "Yes," Scholar Nethvara replied simply, "because we understand that trust cannot be demanded, only earned. Our ancestors took everything from your people. We hope to give everything to them." But it was the cultural data that proved most shocking. The reformed devourers had spent 2,000 years studying the galactic civilizations they had once hunted. Their libraries contained detailed analyses of human adaptability, Threnody problem-solving, Gornek engineering, Villani intuition, and dozens of other species' unique strengths. "You've been studying us," observed Admiral Santos. "We have been learning from you," Scholar Nethvara corrected. "Your species showed our ancestors that cooperation was possible across biological lines. We have spent 2 millennia trying to understand how you achieved what we thought was impossible." The negotiations that followed were unlike any in galactic history. Instead of the usual careful diplomacy between established powers, they resembled a massive cultural exchange program. The reformed devourers were eager to learn about galactic civilization, while the galaxy was fascinated by the transformation of its ancient enemy. "There's something else," Scholar Nethvara explained during one session. "The reason we returned now, instead of waiting for the full 3,000-year cycle. Which is, we've detected signs of another threat, something moving toward this galaxy from a different direction, using technology that makes our ancestors look primitive." The revelation sent the assembled diplomats into emergency session. The galaxy had just begun to process the return of the Devourers when they learned that something worse might be coming. "What kind of threat?" demanded Admiral Santos. Scholar Nethvara activated a holographic display showing sensor readings that defied interpretation. "We call them the entropy shepherds. They don't consume matter or energy like our ancestors did. They consume possibility itself, turning ordered universes into chaos." Dr. Malrise studied the data with growing alarm. "This looks like they're somehow manipulating probability on a cosmic scale." "Exactly. They make unlikely events inevitable and inevitable events impossible. Entire galaxies have simply stopped working. Stars refuse to shine, planets drift away from their orbits, the fundamental forces become unreliable." Commander Cheng Kethvar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environment. "How long do we have?" "Our best estimates suggest approximately 500 years before they reach this galactic cluster. But, Commander, we cannot face them alone. Neither our people nor yours have technology sufficient to fight an enemy that can rewrite the laws of chance itself." "What are you proposing?" Scholar Nethvara's alien features arranged themselves into an expression that somehow conveyed both hope and determination. "We are proposing to finish what the Battle of Nexus system began, true integration. Not just cooperation between our civilizations, but actual merger. Combined genetics, shared consciousness, unified purpose." The proposal was so radical it took several minutes for anyone to respond. "You're talking about the end of species as separate entities," Admiral Santos said slowly. "We're talking about the birth of something greater than the sum of its parts," Scholar Nethvara replied. "Our ancestors were transformed by hunger and became monsters. Your people were transformed by necessity and became heroes. Together, perhaps we can become something that can face the impossible and win." The debate that followed would continue for months, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The galaxy that had learned to work together through necessity 3,000 years ago was ready to take the next step through choice. The entropy shepherds would find neither the helpless prey that the original devourers had hunted nor the separate species that had barely managed to cooperate against that threat. They would find something new, something that had learned from both predator and prey, that combined the adaptive hunger of the devourers with the cooperative spirit of the Galactic Alliance. They would find a civilization that had learned not just how to fight the impossible, but how to become impossible themselves. Commander Zara Chenkethvar stood again on the observation deck of Unity's Edge Asterisk. But now she watched as human ships worked alongside reformed devourer vessels, their crews already beginning the integration process that would transform both civilizations. The memorial station that had been built to remember one victory was becoming the birthplace of something unprecedented. A civilization that chose evolution over destruction, growth over consumption, unity over division. The entropy shepherds were coming. They would discover that some prey evolves into predators, some enemies become allies, and some impossible things happen simply because someone is too stubborn to accept that they can't. The galaxy was ready. The descendants of those who had stood at Nexus System were still standing, still fighting, still refusing to give up. And they were no longer alone.